Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Hope you're doing well. Now, back in 2013, I moved from Japan to Qatar, which is a tiny little Gulf state right next to Saudi Arabia, to take up a new job. And when I was there, I started to learn Arabic just a little bit. I would actually find much more motivation to learn Arabic in my next job, which was in Egypt, because in Egypt, people actually do speak Arabic, whereas in Qatar, most of the people in the country are actually English-speaking expats who are there kind of building up the country. Anyway, a very curious thing happened when I started to learn Arabic, which was that it was incredibly confusing to know exactly what to learn. Now, this is a very odd statement for those of you who are learning, say, French or Spanish or something like that, because you just think, well, just learn the language, right? Well, as it turns out, it's not that simple, and that's what we're going to be diving into today on the podcast. All right, then, let's hear today's question.
Hi, Olly. How are you doing? I'm Mauricio from Peru, and it's the second time that I send a question to you. So I'm currently learning Arabic, but I'm a little bit confused and I have some doubts if I'm making any mistake or not, because I'm currently learning Modern Standard Arabic, because I heard that it's very important to study the Modern Standard Arabic because it's the real Arabic and it's highly recommended by the native speakers. But in the other hand, I read that in many sites that it's useless to learn MSA and I have to study dialect, any Arabic dialect. So I'm a little bit confused of what do I have to study? I have to study both or only one of them. So I wanted to hear your opinion. What do you think about this topic? Thank you very much.
Hey, Mauricio, thank you very much for your second question. Mauricio left a question a couple of years ago. Episode 112, the question was how to avoid mixing Portuguese and French. So this is the second question. Thank you very much for coming back and leaving another question. I really appreciate it. I can see you're moving from language to language. You've done Portuguese, you've done French, you're onto Arabic. So you've obviously got a great passion for languages, which is great to see. All right then, so Arabic. You are right to be confused. It's extremely confusing. And everybody tells you something a little bit different, but I've met a lot of Arabic speakers, or I should say a lot of Arabic learners, second language learners, and I've noticed a lot of things in common between those people. So basically what happens with Arabic, depending on who you speak to, you get different answers. If you speak to native Arabic speakers, they will tell you one thing. If you speak to sort of newbie Arabic learners, they'll tell you something else. If you speak to teachers, they'll tell you something else. And if you speak to people that have actually sat down and learned and become fluent in Arabic, they will tell you something else. Now, I prefer to pay attention to the people who have actually done it. All right. So let me run through this topic and try and pick it apart for you. Ultimately, it is going to come down to your aims, Mauricio. Okay. So you, as you're listening to this, you need to think to yourself, well, what is the reason that I'm learning? Because that is going to affect the way you approach this topic. All right. So let's start off with a few basics just to lay the groundwork for this. There are typically considered to be three forms of Arabic. The first one is Quranic Arabic, and this is the Arabic that you will read in the Quran itself. So it's a very, very literary, scholarly form of the language. Secondly, you've got MSA, or Modern Standard Arabic, and this is the what we could, I guess the clue is in the name, right? We can call this the standard form of Arabic. And this is a written language. Okay, so you will find it, books will be written in MSA, newspapers are written in MSA. Also, in very formal situations, like a news broadcast or in the government office, you will hear MSA being spoken. Okay, now, apart from those situations, you will never ever hear Modern Standard Arabic being spoken. Hardly ever. Sometimes people might do it for effect, but basically local people across the Arab world do not speak to each other or to themselves in Modern Standard Arabic. Okay, if you go to Egypt, then people will speak to you in Egyptian Arabic dialect. If an Egyptian person goes to Syria, the Egyptian person will speak Egyptian Arabic, and the Syrian person will speak their local dialect, Syrian Arabic, together. Okay, so Arabic speakers from across the Arab world communicate to each other in their own dialects, which are mostly mutually intelligible. Okay, so someone from Syria or Iraq can understand someone from Egypt or Saudi Arabia with different levels of difficulty. Now, there are some exceptions. So someone from Morocco, in Morocco, they have a very, very different form of Arabic. So someone from Morocco and Saudi Arabia may not be able to understand each other that well. But, on the whole, people who speak different Arabic dialects can communicate. Okay, so this is the important point. The way that you speak Arabic for practical daily use in any situation is going to be in a dialect. It's not going to be modern standard Arabic. Okay, so once you realize this, if you plan to speak the language, if you plan to go and live in an Arabic speaking country, if you have friends or a girlfriend or whatever, any situation where you plan to be practically communicating with Arabic speakers, then in my view, it only makes sense to learn the dialect. How can you justify learning anything else? It would be like me saying, I want to learn Cantonese, and so I'm going to go and learn Mandarin first. Yes, they're related, but they're actually different languages. So that's my basic position on this, but it's not that simple. We have to row back from there because there are all kinds of practical considerations that make for this not to be such an easy question. So in theory, you would learn the dialect. What happens in practice is the following. Arabic dialects are extremely undocumented and under-resourced. And this stems from the fact that spoken Arabic and written Arabic are different. Okay, so generally what happens is if you go to Egypt, I'll use Egypt because it's the example I'm familiar with, okay, the context I'm familiar with. If you speak to people in the street, you will speak in dialect, Egyptian dialect. Now, if you were going to write a letter to them, you would not write the same thing, okay? You would not write what you speak. Instead, you would write Standard Arabic, which is the more literary, proper, if you like, form of Arabic, and that's how you communicate in the written way. Now, I was very surprised when I worked in Egypt to find that, in the office, often we would want to write a letter or a note to customers, and I would obviously I can speak Arabic, I can't write Arabic. It's very hard, so I would need to find someone to write this memo for me that would go out to customers. And in an office of 100 people, there may be 2 or 3 people only who are able to write formal Arabic, which is, I couldn't wrap my head around this at first. Can you imagine, in the UK, for example, which is where I'm from, not being able, finding anyone, any kind of educated person in an office being unable to write a memo to go out publicly. In the English language, it simply doesn't happen. Okay, you can have people who write more or less well, more or less articulately or grammatically accurately, but basically you can all write something that goes out, right? In Arabic, not the case, because in general stuff for public communication or professional communication, only those people who have studied modern standard Arabic to a university level are able to write that down because there are so many rules. It's incredibly difficult. Right, so we would have to kind of, even though we had a couple of hundred people in the office, we would have to wait for the kind of 2 or 3 people who were able to write in formal Arabic to be free so they could actually write this letter for us. Okay, so that starts to give you then an insight into what the challenge is. Okay, so you've got the spoken language and the written language. And because the dialects are spoken languages, textbooks and resources basically don't exist. Now, there are some. You can probably find a kind of colloquial Egyptian Arabic or something. They're mostly going to be phrase book based. Even some of the... So you'll have like the English transliteration, which is just awful. But, it just gives you something to start using, right? The most popular Egyptian Arabic textbooks are completely in Arabic with no English, which means you have to have a teacher to help you. It's basically very, very hard. And the way I got around this when I learned Egyptian Arabic was I just had tutors. So I would meet people. I kind of connected with people at my office and asked them to kind of sit with me and help me practice. And we would sit for 2 or 3 times a week. I would try to say things in Arabic, and they would help me say them, and I'd like a language exchange basically. And I would slowly kind of build up my ability to communicate in the language that way, because all I was really interested in doing was actually speaking. So even though I would recommend that you learn the dialect of Arabic which you're interested in practical terms, this is extremely hard to do, right? Because of materials and resources. Any textbook that you pick up about Arabic is going to be about modern standard Arabic, with a few exceptions, but on the whole, that's what you're going to find. So if you are in Peru, Mauricio, and you want to learn Egyptian Arabic, then the big challenge is not so much, well, how much do I want this, but it's actually how, practically speaking, am I going to do it? Because you're going to run into so many problems. You're not going to be able to find resources. You're not going to be able to find textbooks. You can find teachers, but then often the teachers as well, you need more than that. And so then this is kind of brings us to the next point, which is, even if you do just learn to speak the dialect, by doing that, you are not learning to read and write. And as I've found in the harder languages that I've learned, if you don't learn to read and write a language, then you run into some pretty serious problems once you get to intermediate stage and above. All right, so you can get to a fairly decent intermediate level of speaking in a language like Arabic just by doing things like language exchanges, doing some listening, taking some lessons, learning conversational Arabic. But the problem is then, as soon as you get to this kind of intermediate level, what happens is the next things you have to learn become much less commonly spoken stuff, right? It's more academic language, more literary language, more formal language. And in order to be exposed to this stuff, you have to be able to read. Otherwise, you simply never come across this vocabulary. And so then you're left with this problem of, okay, well, I speak the language, but I can't actually read it. And then at that point, you're in this quite awkward position, which I found myself in before. I'm in this position with Cantonese right now, where I can speak the language pretty well, but I can't read it. And that's an incredibly demotivating situation to find oneself in, to be illiterate in a language that you can actually speak. Because you have to then go back to the beginning and start to learn to read and write. Now, in Arabic, it's not so difficult to read and write, because there's only, I think, 28 letters in the alphabet. But the vocabulary is different between modern standard Arabic and the dialect. And so you're in this kind of chicken and egg situation, much like what happens with Chinese. The big debates in Chinese is, should you learn to read and write Chinese characters at the beginning when you first start, or should you wait until you've learned to speak a little bit? The reality is that if you plan to become to get to a high level in Arabic, if you want to take the language seriously and learn it for the long term and be able to use it, very well and professionally, you need to learn to read and write. It's indispensable. And so in that situation, you're you still got this question of, okay, well, should I learn to read and write at the beginning, or should I wait? And if you choose to learn to read and write at the beginning, then in that case, it makes much more sense to learn modern standard Arabic, because it's so well resourced. You're going to be able to find tons of textbooks, tons of material, tons of teachers to help you out with that. You're going to have a much easier time. And so I think when you're first getting to grips with a language, the path of least resistance is a very attractive one. And so in that scenario, then you're going to be faced with learning to read and write modern standard Arabic, which is a big task. It's going to take you at least a year or two, because it's a difficult language. And then you would transition gradually, or at the same time, if you'd like, to the spoken dialect. I think probably if I were going to do this again from the beginning, and Arabic was a long-term project for me, and I intended to take it to a very high level, I think what I would probably do is what my friend Steve Kaufman is currently doing. He's learning Arabic right now as we speak, April 2018, and he is doing modern standard Arabic, and he is simply he got a few videos about this on YouTube. Actually, you should go and check them out. He has got all these stories that he's got in Arabic, and he's listening to them over and over. He's learning to read slowly and painfully, based on what he said. But he is just building up this knowledge in modern standard Arabic, and he's doing it the Steve Kaufman way, which is very, he's got his own method that he's using which involves a lot of reading and listening to these stories. But you could do it just as easily with a textbook and other formal resources if that's the way you prefer. But the point is that he is learning modern standard Arabic, aiming to get a foundation in the language. And I think that's what I would do now if I was going to start from the beginning. I'd focus on modern standard Arabic. I would study very hard, try to get my level to, as good as it can be quite quickly. Because once you've got that foundation, then your options are open. You can transition to a dialect if you want, or else you could keep studying MSA so that you can, read and write more and then kind of learn the dialect on the side. You can still communicate with people in modern standard Arabic. It's just that that's not the language that they speak. So it's not like you are unable to communicate, because you are. And so to try and wrap this up then, Mauricio, I think you've really got two choices. Choice number one is to focus just on speaking, and you would do that with the people around you or the people from the community you're interested in. Remember I said earlier, it comes down to your motivation. So this is it. This is the big question. Why are you learning Arabic? If it is just to speak to people in your local community or something, then figure out what dialect they are speaking and just learn that, because you're going to be able to start to communicate with them very quickly. I have a speaking-based approach with lots of language exchanges, lots of speaking time on italki or something like that. Listening as much as possible, maybe YouTube videos, things like that. But then with that approach, you have to remember that trouble is in store further down the line, okay? Option number two is what you would follow if you have a more general interest in Arabic, or you want to take the language very seriously and take it to a very high level over many years. And in that case, I would learn modern standard Arabic quite seriously, not because you're going to be able to use it in speaking right away, but because it is going to give you the foundation that will allow you to do anything else later on in the language. So I hope that was useful. I'm aware that this is not without controversy, this kind of answer. So if you are an Arabic expert, if you have experience with Arabic and you'd like to reply to some of the things I've said, please do come to the show notes, iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 251. Maybe you have a different viewpoint or some tips for Mauricio there. If you'd like to ask me a question, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask in order to do that. Now, at the end of every episode, I like to leave you with a resource of some kind on the topic of the show. And I thought I would leave you with a little video that I did in Arabic and about Arabic. So only a little bit in Arabic, I think, but it's when my friend Jan came to visit me in Egypt back in 2014. Oh, it's a long time ago now. Anyway, we sat outside on my balcony in Cairo and we recorded a video. He was asking me questions about Arabic. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. You can find it again at iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 251. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way, through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free Story Learning Kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit, that's PODKIT, to get free access. Inside, you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT. And if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.